Hey, it's JayMac again with Joyful Parents, the station where we give you life hacks that you can use today to make a difference in your parenting life, to make parenting less stressful and more joyful. Today, I have a question for you, and it's gonna create some controversy, but that's okay. There is no right or wrong answer. I don't think. I know I have my opinion and my answer, and I'll share it with you. But are you saving up for your children's inheritance? Or are you saving up for their education? This is something that I am conflicted about. Now, I will tell you that I told my children growing up that there would get no inheritance and that I wanted to spend every last dime. In fact, I used to joke and say, if I am on my deathbed and I am in an ambulance and we pass by a grocery store and I can put my very last dime in a gumball machine, I will do that on the way. You are getting nothing. Now, the reason I shared this with my children is because I didn't want them to think that they weren't going to have to save money on their own, that they weren't going to have to work, that they weren't going to have to do things to prepare for their own life. And so the whole time I've planned on, maybe having something to hand over to them, although running for Congress has exhausted all of our funds, so we are starting over. But I always knew in my heart that if we did have an inheritance, that at some point we would, pass along some of that. But I also decided we would never pass it on in the form of cash. And I'll give you an example. My grandfather was an inventor, and he was a very successful inventor. He supported himself his whole life from his inventions. And he set up a trust fund instead of an inheritance. And the way the trust fund worked is if anybody wanted to go to college, the trust fund would help pay for that college. Now, I really like this idea because it wasn't just cash to do whatever you wanted with. It had a specific purpose, and that purpose was positive. So this is the type of help that I hope that I can get myself back into a position to do so that potentially my grandchildren can have help with college. Now, even with that, it didn't pay for college outright. In fact, I believe it was matching funds. So whatever you could come up with was matched by the trust fund. Now, to me, that's just a brilliant way to go because it still allows your children to know that they need to work and they need to save up their own money. But at the same time, it takes some of the burden off because they don't have to raise as much. And hopefully they can avoid student loan debt and those types of things through that type of program. I just think that you have to be very careful with things like an inheritance. I think that it can allow your children to make choices that they wouldn't otherwise make, take risks that they wouldn't otherwise take, knowing that there's this nest egg coming up in the future. And, there's this other mentality out there. I see it a lot in the younger generations. I have a lot of friends who their kids are in their early 20s. They just got married and they're buying a house right now. They spent 20 grand on a wedding and now they've taken any money they've had, they've gotten a down payment from their parents, and they're buying a house today. And I have to tell you, that seems so strange to me because, when I was married, there was no money for a house. We went and we lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and we did that for quite some time. In fact, we did it for years and then eventually saved up enough money to get into a house. And that struggle and that savings and that sacrifice made us who we are. It strengthened us. It gave us resolve. It gave us a work ethic. And so I think that there's a fine balance. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't give your children money. I'm not saying you shouldn't help them out. But, another question that people will ask is, if you won the lottery, would you tell your children? And my answer is no. No, I wouldn't. And in fact, I wouldn't tell anybody. If I won the lottery, I wouldn't tell a soul. And I don't know how much my life would change. I do believe that in times and circumstances, depending on what was going on, I would help my children. But I would be very careful not to enable them to be able to, be free and loose with their money. I'd want it to be a situation where it's going to help them instead of enable them to stay in their current situation. So I think the question about whether or not they get an inheritance, whether or not you give them a lot of support, do you help them buy a house? Do you help them pay for college? I think that in every one of these circumstances, I would just add this. This is just my advice to your children. You know them better than anybody else. You do what is most important or what you think is best. But in every case, I would require some type of effort and sacrifice on their part. If not, I believe you're robbing them from learning and growing opportunities. And this has been our philosophy so far. I will tell you in total honesty, it has not worked with all of our children. So, but we're still working on it. We're still pressing forward, and some of them have got it, others not yet. But their brains aren't fully filled in yet, so we will give them some time to figure it out. So just an important question for you today about inheritance, about whether you win the lottery, how much you should help your children. I'd love your opinions on this in the comments. And we do talk about this in my online course, Joyful Parents. Life hacks for parents to make parenting more joyful, less stressful, less anger-filled. I hope you'll check that out at jaymcfarland.com. And I also hope if you like this content that you'll take a minute to like it, subscribe to it, push that bell so you're notified anytime that we release a new video.